Welcome back. This is a customer's car that we've had here for a little while now while we've been working through a few issues with it. It's got a built engine, a built forged engine. All the parts came from K-Tech and it was built by Project Performance in Melbourne. So the car's come up to us for a tune. We've put in one of our M150 kits. We've also wired in a lot of additional sensors on this. When the car arrived, it's got a green filter system, but we've moved it down to the front here so it can actually suck cold air. When we first ran the car, the filter lived down here and all it did was suck warm air in. So we were seeing about an additional 10 degrees of intake charge temperature, just because basically it was sucking in, air that was already at 40 or 50 degrees C, rather than the ambient of 30, and the intercooler can only do so much. Now, what you really need to understand with all of this is that 10 degrees C of air intake temp, it's about 2.5% of air density. So if the air isn't as dense, you physically can't make as much power with it. So if you are going to fit a like a replacement air filter, you really need to make sure that it can get cold air. If you look at the K-Tech kits, they do put the filter up in this area here, but you'd also see that they retain the factory scoop, so the factory scoop can kind of supply cold air into that box. Just having a filter up here with no ducting to it, it's probably not really ideal. We've redone a lot of the boost pipes on this, just because this car is fitted with a G25-660. We're actually going to have to up-spec that because, as you can see, we fitted a speed sensor to the turbo, and the speed sensors told us that we're actually out of turbo at about 1.7 bar boost. Basically, the turbo's at 168,000 RPM. Turbos are only rated to 165, so to keep going like that would really jeopardize the longevity and reliability of the turbo. So we've got a G30-770 that we're going to put on the car and just re-dyno it. The car's currently making about 300 kilowatts or just over on E85. If we put petrol back into it, like 98, that drops down just over 280. That's just because the petrol doesn't have the charge cooling capacity that the E85 has. So generally E85, you're going to make another 8 to 10% more power just out of it, just because the actual charge temperature entering the cylinder, it's a little bit colder, so it's a little bit denser, so it makes a little bit more power. The other thing you see is we've got a pressure temp sensor that's mounted on the intake pipe. That just lets us know, is there a negative pressure in that in the pipe? What is the charge temperature coming in? We also have an ambient temperature or an ambient pressure sensor just here. That also tells us basically what the ambient pressure is for the day. All these Renaults have an ambient temperature sensor in the passenger side mirror that we access from the CAN bus. You can see we've got a Bosch drive-by-wire motor here that we're driving as the electronic blow-off valve, so we can program the conditions for when the blow-off valve or bypass valve opens. It just gives us a lot more control. We saw on this turbo that it was starting to get some surge damage on it because the system basically didn't have a blow-off valve on it before. The other thing we've done is we've got a 54mm throttle body on it. We modified the factory manifold, we bore them out. We can get a 54mm throttle body in there. We were finding that we were getting a pressure drop across the butterfly because the factory butterfly is only 44mm. It's got one of our boost pipe kits. We've up-spec'd the map sensors in the boost pipe and the manifold to a 4-bar unit from the original 3-bar unit. It's just because we're trying to run about 30 pounds through this engine, and at 30 pounds you're right at the top end of that 2-bar unit, and you can kind of max it out or go past the top value. We really didn't want that to happen in this case. We've also put a couple little catch cans into the car. It's just when we pulled the manifold off it, we're kind of seeing that it was starting to suck some oil into the manifold. It's because the car's running on E85. E85 won't wash the oil out of your intake tract, whereas petrol will, because this car's been on E85 since the engine was built. we're just starting to see a little bit of build up in the manifold. So we're basically at one catch can here. This catch can basically vents for the breather from the engine that used to go into the factory pipe pre-turbo. So now we run that through a can so we can just catch anything that's going in. The other pipe that runs from here down to this area here, that runs to a catch can that's kind of down there, that's a bit hard to see. That's the main one, because this is the area where the vapor gets sucked into the engine. There's a one-way valve there as well to stop it pushing air back. That valve is very important, like please never delete that. Otherwise you'll start pushing oil out of the rock cover into the pre-turbo pipe. So we've just replaced that, and we've replaced a lot of lines. There's our flex fuel sensor. The vehicle came to us already with a surge tank in the boot and dash 8 lines, which is really good, and we've got a turbo smart reg up here. The only thing we also did with this is we've actually hard tapped this into the regulator and the manifold with a fixed line. Anything above 25 pounds I really don't recommend having a push on hose. They just have a tendency to blow off. If they blow off, the rising rate part of the reg doesn't work, and basically your engine's at risk. It's got our individual coil upgrade. Runs oil pressure temp sensor. We've also done an oil pressure pump or an oil pump upgrade on this. It's a really good idea. The pumps themselves are relatively cheap. The pumps themselves come off, I think it's the F9K engine, so it's the diesel version of this F4R. Basically the standard gears in these F4R engines are 31mm long. The F9K version, they're 38mm long. So there's just more capacity. We saw a really good oil pressure increase in this. Before this it was struggling for 45 psi, which at the top end isn't enough, especially if you want to run a bit more boost. And it was also struggling to drive the camshaft. Now runs 65 psi hot. Camshaft, the intake variable camshaft, it tracks perfectly now because it's got enough oil pressure for it to do its job. The other thing we've put on to this is we've actually got an intercooler sprayer now. You can see a little bit of water on the ground from where we've been testing it before. Basically we've got 4 nozzles up along here. This turns on and sprays and just puts a little bit of cold water in front of the intercooler. It's programmable for how long it stays on, stays off, at what temperature, at what boost pressure. It's all fed out of the factory washer bottle. We've basically got it so it'll spray for 5 seconds, then it'll turn off for 15, then it'll spray for another 5. If we ran the thing flat out, there's around about 5 to 7 minutes worth of capacity in this pump unit over here. So if we just pulse it, it's got plenty of capacity, and we can keep going with that for quite some time. So that's basically where this is now. We're going to do a turbo change on it, as I say, and just see where we finish up. What we did notice is this is a bar and plate intercooler. Generally when we tune our cars, we delete off the intake pipe, we just lift it off. That just lets us be able to tune the engine effectively normally aspirated, if you like. Bar and plate intercoolers are very, very efficient at removing temperature. Unfortunately, they do create a little bit of restriction. When we do this normally aspirated, we're probably seeing 10 to 15 kPa of restriction through the core, which is kind of okay. Under boost, we're kind of seeing about 20 kPa of restrictions. So if we're putting in, because we have this boost pressure sensor here now, we know that we've got 1.9 bar of boost in this pipe, but we're only seeing 1.7 bar here and here, and that's just the restriction across the front of the intercooler. So that's about where we're at. We'll leave this video here. We'll do the turbo change, and we'll show you what we can make. Hopefully it'll just let us go this a little bit further, because as I say, the turbo's starting to get to the point where it'll overspeed. The Motec system will protect it against that. You can just put in a turbo speed limit, but we're really not getting to the performance level we want out of the car, so we're going to go to a bigger turbo. Hopefully we won't have any more lag. We're going to analyze all of that. We might have to change a spec on the AR ratio on the exhaust housing if we do, but basically this turbo, we can only get about 1.75 bar of boost out of it at 6,500, because we're right on the upper edge of the turbo RPM speed. Stay tuned, call back, there'll be some more videos of this car and how it all finishes up and where we get to with it. So look forward to seeing you next time.